Okay, so I see a lot of misconceptions out there with regards to Patreon, and this goes across the board, right? This includes people that have never pledged to anybody, perhaps thinking about pledging to people, but are a bit reluctant to do so because they don't kind of understand how it works. It also includes people that are already pledging and don't really understand what it is that they've signed up to. And it also incredibly includes content creators. I've had a couple of content creators who have Patreon accounts that have contacted me and said, I've set up this account, I've started doing it, it's been running a few weeks, I'm not sure if I'm doing it right. Am I doing it right? And incredibly, they weren't. They hadn't ticked the right boxes there to set the wheels in motion. So what I want to do in this video is to look at the reasons why, quickly cover the reasons why people start Patreon accounts, and then look at the two models, the monthly model and the per video model, and have a quick look, hopefully a quick look, but it is me, so don't hold your breath on that one, at the pros and cons of each model, and maybe clear up a few of those misconceptions. Now, I'm doing this in lieu, of I do a sort of Patreon related video every 3 or 4 months, where effectively it's a sell for my Patreon and as to why I run a Patreon and why I'd like you to pledge to me, right? I'm not going to do that here, but I might mention my Patreon along the way. So that's about as far as I'm going to go with that. If at the end of the video you feel motivated on the basis, not of this video, but of my content, to pledge to me, then that's absolutely fantastic. And if you was here right now, I'd obviously suck your cock or lick you out or whatever, but you're not. But you probably will get a little thank you message off me in lieu of that. Okay, so what are the reasons why people start a Patreon? Some people seem to have started it as a career move. We've seen that with Sargon of Akkad, for example. For others, it maybe becomes a career move. I would suggest Rebecca Watson's a little bit like that. She's making about $1,000 a video. I don't think she started a Patreon quite anticipating that and seeing that as a primary source of income, but it must have become a primary source of income. A little word of warning with that, it's bad enough just being a YouTuber and that being your source of employment, unless you've got a really a niche that you think is going to carry on for a long period of time. If you're just making Minecraft videos and that is your career, then I suggest that's a pretty fucking tenuous career. But if your career is also very much based upon Patreon, that's just one website, and there's no other website that will replace that website straight away if it goes down. So if either your channel ceases to become as successful, or Patreon suddenly overnight disappears, that's it. That's your career gone. So it's a kind of, potentially there's a lot of money to be made there perhaps, and potentially you can make a living, but you're kind of skating on pretty thin ice with that. Pardon me. Ideally, it's probably not a very good position to be in. Some people do it out of necessity, and that doesn't mean that you need it to put bread on the table, but I know quite a number of YouTubers who, as they've got older, and I think this is why you don't see so many older YouTubers, life just kicks in. You get kids, you get responsibilities, and you cannot afford the time on what is a hobby. This is kind of thing that happened with Non-Stamp Collector, who was making these fantastic videos on atheism, and he had to stop doing it because he got a little baby. And that was the position I was going to find myself in, and that was the primary reason why I started mine, because otherwise I'd have had to earn a bit of extra money doing something else in the time that I was making the videos. People feel that their material deserves some reward, and that links in with the next one, which is that people feel that they already know that they have some people that would like to contribute to them on the basis of the material that they make. And that's fair enough. If you're making something that's high quality content, why on earth shouldn't you have a punt and see if anybody would like, because if people are out there and really appreciating your material, there are bound to be some of them who will be motivated to say, do you know what, I've really enjoyed this for a period of time, I'd like to chuck a few dollars your way. And that is actually some of the responses that I got, which was that, never mind your circumstances, Jim, I've made this, but I'm also motivated not to tell you that even if your situation wasn't like that, I've enjoyed your content for a few years and it's nice to give you something back. And the last one I put down in terms of why people do it is to improve output. And I'm sure that is a reason why some people start. And even if it isn't a reason why they start, it becomes a motivating factor down the line. It certainly did with me, because one thing you realise, right, one thing that comes to you after a couple of months is that you feel more of a sense of responsibility than you ever did when you were just making videos and people were watching them. If the video was really crap, well, really you don't owe anybody anything. But once people are pledging to you, you feel a sense of responsibility for the material you're producing. And so in terms of the production values and the effort that you put in and also the product that comes out, you feel like you have to be a little bit more responsible for it all. And there are obviously ways in which you can invest in new microphones, new webcams, softbox lighting, green screens, more computing power, or perhaps a new, more software, editing software, a subscription to Adobe, which is the model that they use now for Photoshop and Adobe Premiere, etc. So there are different ways in which you can do that. But what I really want to look at is this, the monthly model and the per video model, because that is where I think the confusion lies. So let's consider the pros and cons first off of the monthly model. This is where if you pledge to somebody, you make a pledge every month. If you pledge $20 a month, and that is what you pay them every month, $20. Now the pros for that, I think the biggest pros is it's very simple for patrons to understand, right? So you know, and because it's simple for you to understand, what it means is it makes people feel quite secure that they're not suddenly going to get this unexpected kind of bill, and they're going to end up having coughed out a lot more than they thought they were going to do. And that also means that it is predictable for the content creator, right? Because that means that if you know you're getting $1,000 a month, then you know you're getting $1,000 a month, and you can work to that, and you can budget to that, and that is obviously a very nice situation to be in. Another good one is that it gives you no monetary concerns for the content creator if you reduce your output. So if you have a busy month, it's Christmas month, or it's the summer holidays and you're going on vacation somewhere and you're going to be away for a couple of weeks, or just something happens, you're ill or something like that, well, you still get the same amount of money that month as you would a month that you could put a full amount of effort in. And I think that it's a system that's very good if you do big projects that's going to span several months. If you were just getting a $1 per video donation at the end of that, well, it's not an ideal situation there. And also if you do very small projects, right, if you do maybe 18, 20 videos a month, some people are producing videos all the time, just straight to the camera, really simple stuff, none of which is maybe particularly worthy of donations on their own. But if you take that as a body of work over the month, actually, you know, for people who like their material, that's quite a lot of work there. And so maybe the per month model makes a lot of sense in those two cases, the big long projects or the very, very small projects. But there are cons associated with the monthly model. The first is, I think, that there's no incentive to create. It's apt to cause a little bit of laziness, and that's something that obviously you've got to work against if you use that model, because it doesn't really matter. If traditionally you've made 4 or 5 videos a month, it doesn't matter if you then only make 3 or 4 videos a month, or two or three videos a month. Sure, down the line, some of your patrons might get a bit cheesed off with the fact that your output is dropping down, but it doesn't actually give you any incentive to keep putting the time and effort into creating a lot of content, because you're going to get the same whatever. And that does lead on to the second one, which is that unexpected drop in output could alienate the patrons that you have. They're expecting a certain amount of work and then they don't see any. And that leads on ultimately to this thing, which is that you keep paying as a patron. With that monthly model, you keep paying even if no more videos are being produced. And I have seen that. I've seen channels, and I could name you a handful now, that haven't produced anything for 3 or 4 months, but work on the monthly model, and they're still getting pledges every month. And that is obviously going to sour people in the long term, not just to those channels, but to Patreon as a whole, I think. Because really it's not a very satisfying set of circumstances, that where people set it up on a per monthly model. I think you are duty bound, if you set it up on a monthly model, to make sure you keep doing something there. Which brings us on to the per video model. And one of the pros of the per video model, for me, and the reason I chose it, is that there is no ethical concerns with reduced output. So that issue that you had there with the per monthly model doesn't exist anymore now, because I knew, for example, that this kind of time last year, when my little boy had just been born, that I wasn't going to produce any videos. I had a couple of videos that I'd made in the December just before he was born, and I think I put one out on the January and one out on the February, but that was all that I was going to be able to do because I was just going to be too busy, and I didn't want to be in a position where I'd have 2 or 3 months go by where I'd produced nothing and yet people were still getting charged. That really just didn't seem ethical to me. Didn't seem like I'd be able to be very happy with that myself. But you've none of those concerns. If you fall ill for the month and don't produce anything, well, it doesn't really matter with regard to your patrons because they're not going to be charged anything. There's also, with a per video model, a real incentive to create content because you're getting paid for the content. It's piecework, effectively, and you're getting paid for each thing. So that's a big incentive to create content. And I would suggest, and I haven't actually got any figures for this, I need the private figures of what people are getting, but you can earn more, right? If you are a well-invested YouTuber who produces, who spends a lot of time on their channel, invests a lot of time producing their material, then probably more often than not you can make more from the per video method than you can the monthly method. Because I think this is because patrons are happier to pay a little bit more knowing they're paying per piece of actual content. Why? I just think that might be that somebody might say, do you know what, on a per monthly basis, based on the fact that I don't know whether I'm paying you this whether you produce or not, I'll give you $12. But they may be prepared to spend up to $16 or $20 if they know that they will only be paying for content and content that's hopefully reached some kind of threshold you've set in terms of quality. So perhaps there is a little bit scope to earn more there. But of course the con side of that, to move on to the cons, is that if you don't produce anything, you don't get anything. If you are ill for the month, you're not going to earn anything for that month. I think the biggest con with the per video way of doing things is that it is very, very much misunderstood by patrons and potential patrons, and it leads people who maybe otherwise would pledge not to pledge because they think, I'm not really sure what I'm signing up for here. What about if this person, if I sign up at $4 a video, and yeah, it seems that they generally make about 3 or 4 videos a month, and what about if they suddenly make 10 videos or 20 videos or whatever? And this is a real misunderstanding that people have. And I've seen this. Even people that know a lot about how YouTube works, I've seen them do analyses of Patreon and get it wrong. And what they've done is they've just looked on somebody's Patreon page and said, there's 7 videos linked there for August, so that's 7 lots of pledges, and that is not true at all. So let me clear that one up. I have a limit personally. I set a limit, and I say that I would never ask for pledged more than 4 videos in a month. So what that means is, as a content creator, when I make a video and I put it on YouTube, nothing happens on Patreon. You have to link the video to Patreon. But when you link the video to Patreon, you choose as the content creator whether that video will attract pledges or whether it's just a free piece of work and it will just come up on your Patreon account and not trigger a pledge on those people, on your patrons. Okay. So what you can say as a content creator, you can say, I guarantee, as I do, 4. That's my limit, 4. I never ask for pledges for more than 4 pieces of work. So that's one way that you can do it. The other way that you can do it, if you're a patron, is that you have this mechanism. Let's say you want to pledge $3 a video, okay? Well, really, you didn't want to pledge any more than $15 in a month. What you could say is, right, do you know what? I don't know how many videos you're going to make, so I will set a pledge limit of $15. And what that means is, if that person then makes 10 videos in the month and sets them all on Patreon and sets them all as pledged, you will still only pay $15. You will only pledge, your pledges will only count for the first 5 pledged videos. So you can set a limit. Indeed, what I've found with my account is that probably about 50% of people set a maximum. Some people set a maximum of just 1 pledge, so they'll pledge $5 or $4 or even $1 in some cases, but then set a maximum of $1. So the first pledge video I make in a month attracts that $1 or that $5, and then the next videos don't attract anything. So in many ways, then the per video is acting a little bit like a per monthly, but you at least have to produce 1 video that month to attract the pledge. so that you can do that. So there are mechanisms by which either the content creator can set a guarantee or the patron can say, I'm going to set a maximum here to make sure that the content creator doesn't start to take the piss out of me a little bit here and create too many videos in 1 month. But that is a major problem with this per video thing, is that people don't necessarily understand that, and as a result of not understanding that, it dissuades them from pledging. A second problem is that there's a pressure to produce content, obviously, that's a problem for the content creator, but it could also be a problem for the patron, because what it means is if somebody's expectation is based upon creating so many videos a month, if they run out of material, then their content is going to suffer. They're going to make videos just for the sake of making videos, and so the standard of the channel is going to go down. I think it's very important, by the way, if you're a content creator and you start to use this model, to look back at what you've done in the past and think, what rate of videos do I actually make, or what rate of decent videos that I'd want to be setting as pledge do I actually make, and what is sustainable, and not be unrealistic with regard to that, and then you won't come too unstuck and you won't feel too much pressure, I think. So that's pretty much what I need not to say. What I'm going to say is that great, if what I've said here, I hope that's cleared up some misunderstandings. If that encourages anybody to pledge to me, then that's fantastic. That's suppose why I choose to make these videos every 3 or 4 months. But even if you don't, right, even if there are other people you'd rather pledge to, if it encourages you to pledge to them whereas you wouldn't have done otherwise, then that's not a bad thing. And there are people across the spectrum that are doing this and doing a very responsible job of it. I'll give you 2 very different examples. On the per monthly side of things, Steve Shives runs a Patreon account, and whatever you think of Steve, you can think he's a twat and you can think his material's crap, but what is true about it is that he is very, very honest in the way that he runs his Patreon. He keeps his content, he keeps producing good content, he produces content regularly. He isn't taking the mickey out of anybody in the way that he runs it. On the other end of the spectrum, you have Thunderfoot, and you could think he's a twat and you can think his content's crap, but what he does is he does it per video. And if you look at his Patreon feed and look at his creator posts and look at which ones are attracting pledges and which ones aren't, and I've seen him misinterpreted so many times with people just assuming all of those are pledged, not by any stretch of the imagination. He is another person who is you could say a role model in terms of being very, very reserved in terms of what he sets as pledged. So he gets about $3,000 a video. I am quite sure he could set quite a few more videos as pledged without really annoying his patrons, and he could make a whole load more money, but he doesn't. He sets his bar pretty high for what needs to attract pledges. And whatever you think of him, you can't knock him, I don't think, for the way that he runs his Patreon account. So there are people on all sides of the arguments running monthly and per video models that are doing a very responsible thing. And I'd ask you to hold that in your consideration. If that encourages you to pledge to them, that's fantastic. What I would also say is if it encourages somebody, if you're a content creator, but you've not really understood this, if it encourages you to start a Patreon, perhaps if you would benefit from that in terms of improving your output, then that is fantastic. If it encourages you to start making videos on the basis that there perhaps could be some light at the end of the tunnel, and this could be something that you could make a few dollars out of down the line, well, look, that's fantastic, as long as you're not just doing it for the money. You know, if there is something that you have a genuine love for with regard to your content and you do something that's worthwhile, then that would be fantastic as well. So I hope there's been some benefit for this. I hope if you've watched this, you've got something out of it. As usual, thank you for watching, and bye for now.